The paper lay on my desk, full of effort, full of thoughts far too deep for someone his age, and I tried to stay professional, tried to ignore the way his handwriting curved like a whisper, tried to ignore how his words felt like fingers tracing places they shouldn't. But when I looked up from the last paragraph, he was already watching me, his eyes. It's unreadable, his jaw clenched. It's just slightly, like he was trying not to say something bold and wrong and right and dangerous, and I should have turned away. I should have stood up and walked out, but my hand stayed there, frozen on the edge of his words, and he tilted his head just slightly enough to make it clear he saw what I felt and I saw what he was doing. And in that moment, time forgot its shape and I forgot mine, because I wasn't a teacher anymore. Not in that second, not with the way he looked at me, like us. I was the answer to a question he'd been asking in silence for weeks, and his eyes roamed slow, not in a way that felt crude or forced, but in a way that asked permission and gave reverence. Like it was something holy and forbidden all at once, and I felt the air between us shift, tighten, curl around the space, like it wanted to disappear, and my chest rose with something. I couldn't name something that burned just enough to melt reason, and should have spoken something, anything, but my mouth stayed closed as he stepped forward slowly, his hand brushing the desk and his eyes not leaving mine. And then came that look, the one that made my pulse stutter, the one that peeled me open without touch, the one that said he already knew the shape of my skin under this soft silk blouse and the warmth of my breath against the crook of his neck. And I sat there pretending to still be someone I wasn't anymore, someone who could mark a paper and pretend that it hadn't just turned into a love letter. He never had to write, and he didn't speak. As he moved closer, but I felt every word he wasn't saying. I felt it in my bones and the quick ache between my thighs and the fire behind my ribs, and I told myself this wasn't happening. Told myself I was stronger than the way his eyes asked me to fall apart and then stay broken with him. That night, I stayed long. After the halls emptied, long after the janitor's cart had rattled past twice and the lights had dimmed to their quiet hum, and his paper sat folded on my lap, untouched like a wound, and I was about to leave until the soft knock made me still. And my heart betrayed me because it hoped it already knew, and the door opened slowly like the night itself was holding its breath, and there he was in the same hoodie he always wore, the sleeves pushed up just enough to show the veins that told me he'd clenched his fists on the walk here, and when he stepped in, he didn't speak, he didn't smile, he only shut the door and leaned back against it and stared at me like he needed to memorize everything before I disappeared, and I should have stopped it, should have said no, should have reminded him and me of lines and rules and all the things that once kept us safe, but didn't, because I couldn't not. When he walked toward me like he'd made a decision and was daring me to challenge it, not when he reached out and traced the edge of my wrist like it was a sentence he wanted to rewrite. And I didn't move, didn't breathe as he looked at me. Not like a student looks at a teacher, but like a man looks at a woman when he wants to unlearn her name and relearn her moans, and he didn't ask permission because we both knew the answer already. Lived in the space between us, and when his hand brushed my cheek, it was over. It was done, and I let him pull me close, let him bend his head and press his lips to mine like we'd been here before in another life where things like roles and ages and consequences didn't exist. And I sank into him, not because I had no choice, but because it was the only choice that ever made sense, and his kiss was slow like a lesson. He wanted me to understand with my whole body, and he touched me with reverence and hunger, and I lost track of everything, even my name, as his hands stopped places I'd forgotten to feel, and I don't remember how we ended up on the couch or how my blouse ended up somewhere behind us. All I remember is the way he looked at me as if he was finally seeing the truth behind my eyes, and when he whispered my name, it wasn't a question, it was a promise, and I believed it. I believed all of it, even the parts that would ruin us. Because in that moment, he wasn't a boy and I wasn't a teacher. We were just two souls caught in something neither of us could stop. And maybe we didn't want to. The morning light bled through the blinds like truth always does when it's too late to run. And I sat wrapped in the warmth of his arms and the chill of my thoughts, and his fingers drew soft shapes on my bare shoulder. Like he was still writing that same paper, but now I was the subject, and I didn't know what to say because words had been stolen from me. Somewhere between his kiss and the way he whispered, "Please and don't stop, and I'll never forget this." And part of me wanted to believe we could stay in this quiet place where the world didn't exist, where age was just a number and rules were just suggestions, but reality knocks harder than guilt, and I could already hear it pounding in my chest. And in the hallway outside, and in the way his phone lit up with messages from friends who didn't know he wasn't just staying late for help with his essay, I sat up slowly, feeling the echo of last night everywhere. The ache in my hips, the scent of him on my skin, the guilt tangled with the thrill in my hair, and he reached for me, pulling me back softly, not with words, but with a look. The same look he gave me before the fall, and it was that look again that undressed me without touch. That stripped me down to nothing but feeling and fire and fear, and he said my name like it was something fragile and holy, and I turned to face him, wondering how something so wrong could feel like home, and he smiled, the soft kind, the real kind, and said, "I know we can't keep this, but I don't regret a second, and neither do you." And I couldn't lie, not to him, not to myself, because I didn't regret it. Not the way his fingers traced lines on my spine like he was memorizing a poem, not the way his breath caught when I touched his face like he didn't believe I was real, not the way we fit together, like fate had rewritten time. It's just for us, but the truth was coming, and it didn't care how much we felt. It didn't care that I loved the way he looked at me like I was worth risking everything for. And I stood then and began to dress slowly, trying not to let the silence say what we both knew. And he watched me, not with sadness, but with acceptance. And when I reached the door, he didn't try to stop me, didn't beg, didn't cry. He just whispered, "Thank you," and I looked back one last time, locking the image of him into the secret place in my mind, where no one else would ever go, and then I left, closing the door on something that had changed me forever. And as I walked down the hallway, I passed his essay, still marked with the grade I gave before. I let myself fall, and I smiled, not because I was proud, but because I knew I'd never grade anything the same way again, because once you've been undone by a single look, everything else becomes just letters on a page.